Pastor KJV, preaching the word of Jesus, we making his name well.
Hey, what's going on? It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be alive. I hope you believe that. I believe it with all my heart. There's nothing more that I believe in my heart almost than it's a great day to be alive. I believe Jesus Christ is Lord. Greater than that. But the reason I can believe it's a great day to be alive, because this is the day the Lord has made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it. I'm thankful unto him and I'm blessed his name. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? June, Edward Grant. Hey, man, let me know if you got my inbox. Hey, what's going on? How you doing, Angela? Good to see you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's a great day to be alive. I love y'all, man. And I hope you love me too. Even if you don't love me, I still love you. It's not going to change how I love. Listen, this, I'm getting ready to start talking about something that's it's almost like a little shift that's a little different than what I normally talk about. And it's going to be something that is a little touchy. Hey, Crystal Denise DeHolis, what's going on, Nolan? How you doing, bro? It's going to be something a little bit different. It's going to touch some nerves, but it's necessary to discuss. Listen, I want to talk about reparations. And how it is necessary from a biblical perspective for the preservation of this nation. What's going on, Pastor Danielle Moy? For those of you who don't know what reparations is, the root word for reparations is repair. And reparations means that it's a repayment for an injury that has been done. A repayment for an injury that has been done against someone. Hey, Shamara, how you doing, sweetie? Listen, so when we talk about reparations, we specifically talk about the repair for the injury that was done upon Africans who were taken from their homeland and put into slavery. And so, and their descendants. And it is something that is very critical for us to discuss. And if you think it's not critical for us to discuss, then you are purposely piercing your conscience so that you cannot deal with this reality that descendants of African slaves in the U.S. deserve reparations, something to repair the damage that has been done. And so, and it's a biblical concept that we're going to have to face. So if you, I don't care, what your skin color is. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you have to face this. You have to deal with this. Hey, Julie Nicole. Hey, Sharonda. How are you all? Let's talk about this because people don't like to deal with this because, are some people who believe that America has paid its debt to African slaves, descendants of African slaves, and they feel that they've done their due diligence. What's going on, Brother John Holmes? They feel that they've done their due diligence, but that is not the case. It's not the case. So we have to discuss this reality, this truth, this understanding from a biblical perspective. I want to refer you to a couple of things. This book right here It's by Ira Berlin, Generations of Captivity. It is one of the most comprehensive books that I have read about slavery from its inception, starting in the early 1600s up until the end of slavery in 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was delivered. And it gives you a clear picture of how slavery transitioned and evolved in America. All right. And we have to go back and look at this and understand this. Also, I want to refer you to an article on the web, a case for reparations, Ta-Nehisi Coates. He writes it from a perspective of how this thing has continued to perpetuate, right? It continued to perpetuate all throughout history, even after slavery was outlawed, and how it's like what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 8. What's going on, G Money? Hey, Diane, good to see you. He says, when a crime goes unpunished, people's hearts are set to continue to commit evil. So when you don't punish a crime or hold individuals responsible for a crime, people's hearts are fully set to continue to promote that crime. So because America never formally and properly issued reparations for the sins that this nation in its very inception committed against people of African descent, now the hearts of the citizens of this nation feel that it is okay to continue to marginalize a particular people. And so I'm going to be coming from a biblical context. So Ira Berlin, he deals with slavery up until the end of slavery, and how even after slavery it was difficult to get the United States of America to understand the importance of reparations. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates, he takes it from the end of slavery all the way up until now to show how not only have reparations not been discussed and been formally submitted to African Americans, but the injury against African Americans has continued, and it has almost gotten worse. And so that's what I want to talk about. And one thing where myself and Ta-Nehisi Coates differ is that I'm coming from a purely biblical context about how this thing should be handled and how it works. And I'm coming from a different context about what has perpetuated the lack of reparations. He believes it is white supremacy only. And people get cringe when you use the term white supremacy. When you talk about white supremacy, you're not talking about necessarily KKK or people with white sheets or slave masters. When you talk about white supremacy, you're talking about people who have privilege, who don't realize their privilege, while at the same time invoking their privilege to oppress someone else. So that's what he's talking about when we talk about white privilege. All right. But I don't believe that white privilege is the only thing that has delayed the true issuance of reparations. I believe another thing that, a couple of other things that has delayed it is the objectivity of injury. When I say that, I mean that people try to clump the injury against African Americans or descendants of Africans into this big old pot that includes all injury and discrimination that has taken place in America. So this conversation is not talking about women's suffrage. This conversation is not talking about discrimination against LGBTQ+. No, you cannot couple that with this, because when you look at slavery, at the end of slavery in 1860, at the beginning of the Civil War, there were approximately 4 million slaves in the United States. 4 million slaves in the United States. Watch this. And that is like taking the entire state of Mississippi and the entire state of Arkansas and putting everyone in those two states in chains. That is like taking the entire population of Los Angeles and putting them in chains. So when you talk about slavery, you do not have gay people in chains. You do not have women in chains. So you cannot muddle the conversation because it causes a problem. Another thing that has delayed a real true discussion about reparations is African American elitism and classism, because even at the end of slavery, black people who had been free for a decade or so had gained property, had gained an education that was financed by their white counterparts. They had understood the rights that blacks were supposed to have. They had a different concept of what was supposed to happen for these 4 million free black people who have now been free. And what does that look like? What does it mean to give them a honest wage? And so when the battle was fought in the courts, you had this ideology from people like W.E.B. Du Bois, who felt that it was the black elite who should be leading the fight. And then later on, at the height of the civil rights movement, one of his nephews even began to quote him in saying that it was the wrong way to do this. That was not the right way to handle this. And so when you have division within the African American community, and you have white supremacy, and you have also a objectivity of injury, and then when you don't have a true biblical perspective, in other words, you don't invite God into the conversation will not go anywhere. Because we have to invite God into the conversation, because he is the great reparationist, if you will, of the universe. He understands this, because if you look at the Jews, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, he lines this out clearly. When you look at the Jews who were injured by Germany went back, even though they did it grudgingly. They paid reparations to descendants and survivors of the Holocaust, and it caused a stimulus in the Jewish society. And when you look at Jewish America, and when you look at the nation of Israel, they have been able to recover by leaps and bounds economically, politically, and as a power in this world simply because their injury was repaired. But for descendants of African slaves, that injury is yet to be repaired. In fact, the injury has gotten worse. It is like there is a wound in this group of people, and all of the ills of society against them has begun to press into that wound, to cause more injury and even infection. And so I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this as long as God has me to talk about this. I didn't choose this topic. As a matter of fact, 10 years ago, I wrote this book, The State of Unforgiveness. And when I wrote this book, I wrote it, and I didn't intend to leap over into reparations, but I was dealing with things that were taking place in this nation. And it's out of print now, but I'm going to go back and take the content of it and enhance it and elaborate on it throughout this year. And I'm going to produce another book with the same title that's on your live right now. It's a biblical imperative for a national narrative, because if we don't correct the injury and repair the injury, this nation is headed for a great downfall. And I am not a Pan-Africanist, even though I long to see the place of my progeny, even though I have great respect for Africa. Listen, my ancestors who were brought here labored to make this nation what it is. And because they have done that, I have an inheritance here. And I refuse to give that up. And so we're going to talk about and discuss this issue. And to tell you how relevant this is, in July of 2008, Representative Michael Cohen, he led the U.S. House to adopt a resolution to apologize for the atrocities of slavery. And in one particular article, I'm going to read it to you actually, and it happened right as I started writing The State of Unforgiveness, and this is what God showed me to cause me to matriculate into dealing with reparations. It says the United States House of Representatives, this is an article in an e-newsletter written by Deanna Hartley, says the United States House of Representatives issued a formal apology to African Americans July 29th, and this is in 2008, for the ill treatment they were forced to endure nearly 2.5 centuries under slavery. It was two and a half centuries under slavery. And then it talks about Jim Crow, but Jim Crow extended beyond slavery. He says, and Jim Crow laws designed to promote racial discrimination and segregation. Said the apology is emblematic of a culture change in our nation that has been in the works for some time now, said Angela Edwards Campbell, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Diversity and inclusion are critical factors that must exist for people to work collaboratively. So I'm going to skip past that part. Watch this. She goes on to say, the apology introduced by Representative Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen, a Democrat from Tennessee, marks the first formal apology made for the United States federal government to the victims of slavery and segregation. According to published reports, Congress delayed issuing the apology for fear it will give rise to reparations for damages of which no mention has been made thus far. However, the Cohen resolution, as the apology also is known, states the House of Representatives will make attempts to remedy the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws. So that means that America is aware that this is an issue and something that needs to be addressed, but nobody has formally addressed it. Every time the conversation comes up in the House to just study the need for reparations, it's cast down. And if this nation does not change, and if African Americans do not come together and discuss this, and watch this, and if Christians do not come together and understand that this is a necessary thing that has to happen to preserve this nation, we are in for a rude awakening. And so I'm going to be talking about it, and I'm going to be taking you through the Word of God to discuss this. And I'm going to be talking about some things that transpired. I'm going to be taking you through the Word to discuss this issue of reparations over however long a period of time God has me to do it. So this is Helen Jones' second son saying life is too short to play games. So keep it real. 2 fingers to the north. Hey, also share this link. And however you feel about it, comment in the comments. Do your research and write comments. I invite you to, whether you oppose it or you're for it, comment about it. And let's talk about it. God bless you. We're out of here. Pow.